Thank you so much for joining us again this week for another episode of Mystical Musings podcast. This is part 2 of a conversation that we began last week. And if you have not listened to last week's podcast, please make sure and go back and listen to part 1, or else this is not going to make any sense. At least start listening from about maybe 30 minutes into last week's podcast, because the story that I tell at the end of that is now going to be retold by Tava from Samael's perspective. And so I'm really excited to be able to share this with you. As we always like to start you off with a song, we decided to replay last week's Gong song so that we could just set the stage for you and bring in a little bit of sonic healing to set the stage, and then we'll just go right into the conversation.
So, one of the things you heard me mention at the beginning of this episode, I said there's a new class coming out that is a more advanced Lilith class, and it's called Chaos Angel. Right? A Chaos Angel is not an angel, it's a phenomenon. And literally, what you have done for me today is allow Samael to bring up a new category of Chaos Angel that pertains to this situation that he had not spoken with me at length on this before. So get this. See how this goes through. All right. So when she was young, um, she had trauma, and we know she had trauma, right? Now, child in trauma is a very vulnerable thing. A, Samuel talks about how children are much more psychic, much more sensitive to everything because they haven't been embodied that long. There is still a big part of them that has a more full connection to the divine than most adults have, because most adults get busy with the things going on in the world and they stop looking for the divine because they're very busy trying to do the laundry and get food on the table, right? But children are very much in a sensitive space. For example, all the things that people call imaginary friends, not so imaginary, right? You see children who are attached, very attached to teddy bears or certain dolls. You know, teddy bears and dolls are great places for ancestors or spirits or whatever to visit because they get lots of attention from the child and they can kind of be there as a companion to both, right? This is where we get our fascination with dolls. And this goes down a whole different part that I cover in Spirit House on doll magic and why it resonates with people. By the way, side note, somebody sent me one of the funniest things I've ever seen last night. Um, I think the video was on, I think it was on TikTok. But apparently there's a trend out there of tying some fishing wire to a doll. And then when some poor person is sitting in the room with the doll, moving the doll,
Oh
and
no.
they film them. And there are these poor men, there's like 6 or 7 of them in this video, who lose like their minds, their bodies, everything when they see a doll suddenly sit up and start moving towards them. It's hysterical, but I would never do it to somebody.
Oh, that
Um,
is so mean. Oh my
it's
gosh.
so
Like,
mean, especially because I've seen ones move that are just move.
yeah,
There's a little
like
one on the
that.
table next to me whose rocking chair just starts to go without anybody being near it. But I digress. Anyway, so
Oh, and the
so
trauma part, I do want to point out we did not do the trauma. She
no,
was
no, no, no,
adopted.
no, no. She was adopted.
Which I
She was
realized
adopted.
nobody knows that. There was a lot of
Yes.
severe trauma prior to us.
So when you have a child, so a child is already more psychic and more interesting to a lot of spirits and souls because the child hears and sees them much better than most adults. And a lot of spirits, they want to be seen and heard when they're here. They want to interact. Okay. So she's already young. And then on top of it, she has trauma. So that trauma is going to put her in an edge state. Our first lessons on the Lithian magic deal with edge states and the power inherent in them. But humans don't like to be in edge states for very long. It doesn't feel good to our bodies. But there are certain medical situations. These people, if you are bipolar, you live very close to an edge state. If you are schizophrenic, you live in an edge state. If you have post traumatic stress disorder, you are in an edge state, right? So you were saying early on, if the if they had said children could be schizophrenic, this is what they would have called it, right? So here we're seeing that she's living in an edge state. She probably may have, even during the trauma that she experienced, pulled herself out of her body to separate herself from it.
Oh, very much so. Yeah,
In which
no
case,
connection almost with her physical sensation. Like she could have had an arm cut off and wouldn't even notice.
right. So we're looking at a person who has a body, but is really not living in their body due to trauma. And the fact that she is young is going to heighten the fact that she is outside of her body even more energetically. All right. So, this is the situation that we're in. Samael says that then, so she has pain from her trauma. And he says, like energies attract. So when we get into talking probably in another podcast about nesses, right? Your energy can be broken up into pieces. You can send things out with people, but your energy is attracted to other energies like it. That's why we often are friends with, or we're attracted to similar energies in a lot of ways. Okay. So then, probably what happened at that point is he says that this is a flavor of Chaos Angel. And he says what happened is something called a pain nexus. So it is a gathering of other entities' pain, recognized the pain in her, and that she was mostly outside of her body. So it's going to gravitate towards her. The unconscious stuff is going to gravitate towards her. And the conscious stuff says, wow, there's an attraction here, and she can hear me, right? Now, the chaos angel, what Samael says is he says chaos angels can happen in places when a gate malfunctions, or there is an overlapping of dimensions and portals. And he says it's where realities are not lining up and behaving the way that they should. And the reason that they're called chaos angels is sometimes when they happen in your environment, they sound like a flapping of wings. So that's where they get their nickname, is this like, it almost sounds like when you hear an old projector and the film is allowed to run out and the projector is spinning and it's going flap 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 flap. It's, you see that in old movies, right? Sometimes if it's happening in a location, there's a sound, right? And so people dub it a chaos angel because it sounds like wings going and going and going. But what you're actually hearing is dimensions or platforms of reality. Now, there are different types of chaos angels where things have gone, and people can have chaos angels nestle in them because people can be gates or portals, right? So you basically end up with a type of chaos angel called a pain nexus. These are overlapping realities from lots and lots and lots of entities that are all sort of in their realities trying to process their own pain. And they were attracted to her, right? And they're wanting to bring her into, they're not necessarily malevolent. They may just be lost. They may be confused. They may be working on things. But one thing that they are is also energetically starved, right? They are doing such hard work trying to balance themselves that they are looking for anything that will put out, that has a similar energy and will expend energy that they can use. A child has a tremendous amount of energy. So here we have this phenomenon that may have been starting to bloom in her. Okay. So we have the like energies attract. We are now seeing energies from other realms. And this will explain why she's suddenly getting thousands, right? She sees the soldiers. That's probably one or more of the entities trying to process pain and trauma of battle, right? We're getting all of these different people coming towards her for energy, 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 energy. Help me, help me, help me, help me. These energies can take on, there are two big things that pop in. There is something called what Samael terms a locked ghost. And it is a soul so wrapped up in its own pain or processes that a lot of times it will just ignore you. That very first one that you described, where it was soldiers kind of walking by, they're still attracted to the energy, but they don't necessarily speak to you. They're locked. And a lot of times they are just kind of stuck there. All right. But you have other ones that are conscious, that are hungry for energy, and they're attracted, and that they also really want someone to share their pain. And so, what do we as humans do when we want someone to share our pain? We talk, we talk, we talk. Help me, help me, help me. Give me what you have. Give me your attention. Give me your time. Okay. They may be overwhelmed or were overwhelmed at the time of their death when a higher level energetic being, like an angel, came to them and said, "Come on back to the collective." Sometimes they were like, "No, no, no, I still have to, I can beat this," right? Or they feel like they still have work to do, or they're just overwhelmed and can't process the fact that they have died, right? So sometimes those angels have to back off. They're not going to drag somebody back to the collective. But you get these areas, you get people who are working through their pain all the time among the unembodied. That's what they're working on. But if you have too many of them in a space because their energies have all come together and now they're attracted to this child, one of two things is going to happen. The child is going to become a bigger and bigger and bigger area of chaos to the point where they are no longer functioning at all, right? They become locked themselves. Or you have to get in some way an energetic balance to come in to help basically sort of shut the chaos angel down. So and this was one of the big flags here that Samael said. Michael is order, right? A big part of his energy makeup is order. We even know this story from when we talked about fallen angels. Michael determined that a new area needed to be opened, that energy needed to be expended so he could put the bonds on the gate, right? Michael guards boundaries and knows where these things are. Notice Michael wasn't going to fall, right? Because he's the one who's advancing and opening areas and kind of keeping things in order. So when you come up to this, all of these entities that are yelling for energy and attention, Michael, they're going to go, no, 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 don't call him in. First off, some of them they still think they can puzzle their way out of it. Also, his sense of order is huge compared to the chaos they're flying around in. It feels like they're being pulled and it's too much for them, right? Now, he said, Samael says, a chaos angel continues to grow energetically. It was draining her, and it would be getting harder for her to resist over time. So you talked about in the beginning, she was like, no, 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 I can help them. But then you said it got worse, right? This situation is growing. Some of these entities have a smaller energy deficit than others. Now, here is where things start to get me today. And a lot of these entities simply have not forgiven themselves yet. That's why they're in this state, right? They haven't forgiven themselves yet. This makes me think about Macmillan, the inn, because I once said to Samael, there is literally a gate in the next room. Why doesn't he go through it? And Samael says he has not forgiven himself yet. It has been offered to him time and time again that someone will walk through the gate with him if he wants to go. But Macmillan knows darn well that Samael's in the house all the time. It's not like he's not informed, right? It's that he hasn't forgiven himself yet. There is still trauma and pain. Now, but then what happened? What you did was It's phenomenal. She trusted you enough that you were able to say, let's try to bring in energy, right? You were going to bring in Reiki, right? Samael says that there were some in the beginning who he talks about centered souls, right? We all have sort of a main mass of our energy, but we can chuck off little pieces of it and send it with people or create residual energy. There's lots of things we can do with our energy. Some of the energy in that pain nexus didn't belong, it wasn't the main body of a soul, it was a fragment of it. So as soon as you came in and started moving Reiki there, those lower level unconscious parts got fed very quickly, like off they went into the light, right? Samael says a light is a gate to the divine. When you are inside a house, whether it's at night or daytime, a lot of times when we first walk outside at night, we think there isn't any light there because we just came from a very well lit place. But when you walk outside, like you just put down your blinds, there's always more light outside, natural light. It's the divine. He says that calling in the light is the same thing as saying, I call in a gate. And you talked about the column of light getting wider and wider the more you worked with it. These are people who have learned to manipulate energy to open bigger and bigger gates and portals. So your more advanced healers can open bigger gates and portals and let more energy in or out at a time, right? So you got that first thing where those probably the little fragment pieces or the souls that weren't the center of a soul were able to zip out. Okay. And Samael says the way to deal with a chaos angel in a person is to add practices for balance, both physical and metaphysical. So if you have post-traumatic stress disorder, the physical might be the medication that your doctor puts you on. It might be getting a certain amount of rest or having a particular diet or a certain exercise plan, things that you need to balance your physical body because you are ultimately right now, your center is in a physical body. But then you also need the metaphysical. So then you started talking a little bit about the broken heart analogy, like you were saying that certain pain came in to deal with a particular situation, and then it feels like this is its job and it can't leave, right? A lot of these entities were going to become emotionally attached to this sweet little girl who had similar energy to them and was keeping them company and was feeding them energy with her attention, right? But then what you did was exactly what you needed to do. Your Reiki was providing as you got her to do it and it coming through you and going to her because she trusted you, you were giving energy in to these frantic souls that are in pain. They start to, at least they're not starving on top of everything else. They start to become more balanced and they start to be able to listen and process the things that they need to process better. Now, a lot of people would just stop there, but you did something that was incredible. You empowered her to be able to do this on her own. You made the recordings, right? And the recordings are vibration. So she can turn on that vibration whenever she needed it, right? It was you bringing through that energy. So if you've got a hungry, starving soul in pain, now, whenever she turns that stuff on, it's not only feeding the soul energy, but it is moving her out of being in such an edge state that she becomes less vulnerable. And it was so interesting to me because you said your aura becomes stronger. And Samael is basically saying the exact same thing, except what he's saying is you're pulling her back from an edge state, which is just the way that he phrases it. You're pulling her back towards balance, right? Because of her trust in you, she was able to let energy in that ultimately would save her from tipping over and becoming a permanent, or until she got energy and balance some other way, a part of the chaos angel and the nexus of pain. And he says, this is very smart that you empowered her to do it yourself, because a lot of people are going to go, come to me for a session, boom, you feel better. The person walks out, and that chaos angel isn't gone. Those entities are going to come back in, because what people and embodied and disembodied do what works, right? We know that they do what works. And if inhabiting her and visiting her was what was working for them, they're going to try it again and again and again and again, right? So essentially, what you ultimately did in this case was you balanced out a chaos angel, which was so many different painful workings that were drawn to a child who was mostly out of her body, that their realities began to flip and invade each other's spaces. He now had thousands of things that wanted to drink from her cup, while she knew that she could help some of them out. There was no way long term that she was going to be able to provide enough energy for that to be a viable solution. And so, what you did was come and say, Michael is overwhelming for them. You trust me. And you got her to a point where you could call through the divine. You could call in the light. You opened up a gate to allow, and probably because Michael is always around you, this was particularly effective. His order was able to come in, stabilize the situation. You showed a way to support her energetic makeup, so that a lot of these entities, even if they weren't completely, like some of them were able to go on, even if they weren't completely healed in their work, balance themselves enough that they could move on to do the work that they needed to do. So, congratulations, you freaking balanced a chaos angel.
Yay.
And I will tell you, Samael's been talking to me about these things for a few weeks. And in a lot of them, he says there are some that are so dangerous that you literally have to call on the divine and get the heck out of the way. Like there are some things you can try, but if they don't work, you got to move, because the chaos angel will grow and grow and grow. And it just becomes incredibly energetically destructive to everybody around it. So you freaking brought, you tamed a chaos angel with your Reiki, because of the relationship that you had been able to build with a very troubled child. So holy Krakatoa.
I I am so I am so grateful for all of that clarity. I mean, I've been I've been on the path to help to find healing for her and balance for so many years. And I knew that the spirit release did so much of that. Like, I mean, it completely changed our lives. It completely changed her life and let her be able to focus on the traumas and the other things that she needed to focus on to just to get through the day. But it's really amazing to hear the level of explanation of really understanding all of the different aspects. And there's no doubt, I mean, there was definitely a lot of having to deal with the physical because, you know, she was constantly trying to kill herself and us.
Right.
And the level of danger grew and grew and grew as she got bigger and bigger and bigger and more dangerous and more afraid of herself because and she was like, I don't want to do this, but I'm going to have to. And you were talking at one point about the getting kind of lost or getting sucked into becoming one. And there was a point where, you know, she had to go into residential treatment, and it was the most horrible, awful decision we ever had to make. But we knew we could see her dissolving into it. We're like
Yes.
less and less of her. She was disappearing in front of us. There was less and less of her that we could find. And I bet we were down to 15% of her left by the time we had to put her in residential treatment because we couldn't physically keep her alive anymore. Like we were 24/7, you know, motion detectors and with night vision on her when she slept, so that if she moved too much, we were awakened by alarms. I mean, you know, like it was, we couldn't keep her physically alive. And we could see that she was disappearing into it. And she was literally just disappearing. And as hard as it was to have her be away from us, that was also part of it because there was some sort of thing that was happening with us too. And I'm sure we were then carrying, I mean, we were all living in nonstop acute trauma all the time, you know, which, you know, is not the definition of acute, but even the therapists were like, you were in chronic acute trauma absolutely all the time. And so I think there were a lot that were around us too. And so I think there was something about having the separation that allowed her to get a little bit of relief just in the fact that she was terrified that she was going to actually be able to get through and harm us. And she was so relieved that she knew she couldn't hurt us that that allowed for some degree of difference. But I mean, even a couple years later, she came back and we were still that way. She was just bigger, but we had new skills. You know, we had Reiki and we had some new skills. So we were more put back together. And I think that separation, you know, for anybody in similar situations, having the separation and being able to put ourselves back together, then we weren't just creating, I'm sure our whole household just became a bigger and bigger portal for chaos. And I think having that separation too, allowing us to get help. And then we started being able to learn techniques and learn Reiki and have energy work for ourselves. And we weren't underneath all of it so much. And so we were able then to be more, you know, available. But that's why I think people probably think I'm nuts, like the passion with which I recommend people for that peace and release recording, because I'm like, I cannot get across to you how impactful this is. Like, and that's a much stronger version than the version that I'd made for her.
Right. Well, and Samael has some words for you here. He said, it is not just the spirit releasing her. It is her trust in you, the trust you built that saved this. So thing is, if she hadn't trusted you the way that she did, didn't matter how much energy you were putting into it, it wouldn't have gotten in. But she let it flow from you to her. Even though those beings that were saying, don't let Michael in, you were the open door that let him in, that let in that energy. You also talked about a medium of transport. Are you okay, honey?
Yeah, I cannot tell you how much that means. Like, you know, it's like when you look back on years and years and years of trauma and trying to do your absolute best and it not working, you know, or seeming it means a whole lot that all that we did had built a level of trust that could let something like that through, because I know how terrified she was, you know, of Archangel Michael, you know, or of what would happen if we let him in. And I can't thank you enough for bringing that through. It means more than you could possibly imagine. So thank you.
I mean, that was what let it come in. Is, you had the skills and you knew what you were doing, which is phenomenal, but it had to be coupled with that trust. It had to be. And if that trust wasn't there, then that phenomenon would have spread with overlapping. And essentially, I mean, a chaos angel is madness, would have just gone. And there's a real chance it could have taken your whole family out. You all know what it was like to be living in that edge state through that whole time. That's
Yeah.
not where humans are meant to be long term because we have physical bodies. We cannot do it. And so that trust is everything in this situation. It was the remedy it was what unlocked the door. Um, the medium of transport was also really interesting to me because Samael, right before you said some people might not know that they're doing it, he said involuntary versus voluntary. And he said there are some people who are involuntary methods of transport. In other words, he didn't use methods of transport particularly as a name, but he said medium. So
Yeah, and medium is the word that Jonathan uses
who
too.
is it
Medium,
too?
yeah,
Okay, medium of
medium of
transport. Sorry,
transport.
sorry. Involuntary versus voluntary. Um, so there are, I think I talked about this on the podcast, but right before I started being able to sort of experience spirits around me beyond Samael, I had this dream that I was in this huge house and there were all these people in the house. And there was this man with a suitcase. And he would come into the house and go into a room, and then he would walk down the hall and out the front door. And then he would come back in, and I was trying to figure out what he was doing. And at the same time, I was interacting with all of these people in different rooms, and some were just lying there asleep. And there was one room with a young man in it who kept saying, I know I'm supposed to go somewhere, but I don't know what I'm supposed to do. Please, somebody tell me what I'm supposed to do. And it eventually occurred to me that this house was full of souls or spirits that were in transition, and that the man with the suitcase was coming in. And at one point, I saw him open the suitcase, and there were dolls in the suitcase. There were little poppets in there. And he was essentially giving these souls a place to inhabit as he carried them out of the house. And now, from working with Samael, I know that out of the house is out into the wild, right? He's returning them to the divine. And that's where my work has been very intensely these last months, is learning to identify what kind of energy is around. Does it have a need, or is it just an unconscious energy there? And is there a way that I can say, if you are overwhelmed by what's going on, can I do something to help get you to the next stage of what you need? So I am being a conscious medium of transport. Samael's teaching me what to do, and I reach out and then I do what he recommends to try to help get them to a point where they will talk to him directly. We have a lot of people who are just born wicked psychic as kids, and they pick up on energy and they pick up on the dead. And there are things that they do energetically. A lot of them aren't all the way in their bodies. They never came all the way in and were fully embodied, where they pick up on these things. And some of them just do it sort of from sense memory, from having done it in other lifetimes. And when we talk about chaos angels and stuff, Samael started talking to me more about involuntary time slipping as well, which I know is something that on down on a different podcast we'll have to talk about, because that is going to be, I think, of great interest to you. And that's going to end up being in that chaos angel group as well, talking about shifting realities, right? Because a chaos angel is essentially a shifting reality that is completely out of control, to the point where the realities are beating up against each other. And each of those realities has souls in it a lot of times. And that's where we get this wild broken chain. And he talks about when things are small, methods to go in and see, can you help balance the gate? Can you help tame this before it grows out of control? But there are some situations where it has gotten so big that you have to back the heck away. And what is incredible about your story is the amount of bravery that it took to stay there and keep crying to the point where she could then one day say, they still are attracted to me because, you know, her trauma is something that's going to be part of her the rest of her life. It altered her life. They're still going to be attracted, but now it's not unmanageable. It's not chaotic. Now it's, I can have them come in and I know what to do when they're here, but it isn't a thousand of them dragging their separate realities in at the same time or being held there by those realities. So
Yeah.
I'm just, yeah,
Yeah, and the way that Jonathan talks about the mediums of transport too is that it's like a soul mission too. It's a, it's a service, and obviously you can see how it's a service, and
yeah,
the there are so many that need help being that conduit, getting the connection made. And I was wondering when he was saying voluntary versus involuntary, that maybe too, when I'd heard that, I was thinking voluntary as in I came in knowing this is what I do, on some level, but then we come in and we have the
yeah,
great forgetting and we don't really remember that kind of thing, but that I consciously decided to come in to do this versus I sort of became a default way of doing it because I had so much trauma, or I just sort of naturally let in all of these things. And
yes.
now I have to learn how to move them on because I haven't been able to get myself to a kind of vibrational level where that's the floor of the building that I'm on. And that's not where there's a lot of traumatized beings. And so maybe the involuntary, to me, I was thinking of that as, I've just attracted by default, and then I'm going, well, now I have to figure out how to move this on, or somebody else is trying to help me move it on. And so that's a way that the kind of souls are getting to that gate, getting to that light, but it's not from this was necessarily maybe part of my soul purpose, but that's just kind of happening by default.
Right. And that's one of the things that's gotten to be really interesting about teaching the Spirit House classes is Samael going into 8 or 9 different types of sort of broad spectrum energies and saying, because what happens is I encounter a lot of people who are super psychic, but when they encounter something, they're not sure if they should be worried about it or not. Right? They're like, is this something that is dangerous? Is this something that is deceptive? Is this thing that I just saw something that I need to be actively worried about? And so, one of the things that he's been doing basically at the ground level for this class is people come in and he says, let's look at the different type of energies that are left that you might encounter in a place that most of society would just say is haunted, right? And he talks about how you can haunt yourself. He talks about calling your energy back. He talks about residual energies, place echoes, conscious entities that we might term ancestors, actual practitioners of particular types of magic, like demonics, who consciously being malevolent for their own gain, and how to counterbalance that. And then what happens when you walk into a magic circle gone bonkers and there's now 400 entities, popping in and out of it who don't know what's going on, how to figure out what are the first steps I can take to see if this can be soothed, both in places and in people. So one of the things that is neat is that now, like the people who've taken this classes, we can have these discussions where they go, okay, I'm just getting residual off this. I'm not worried about this. Or this is going to startle me, but it's not actually malevolent. Or this particular thing appears malevolent, but I think it's desperate. And if I can feed it energy in the right way without letting it pull energy directly from my body, let me see if I can get it calmed down to a point where it's not desperate. They know they're being heard, and perhaps they will soothe a lot. That's really what happened with the entity that's tied to the doll at the inn with Macmillan. Is our first interactions with him were very scary and nasty, and he would appear to be vicious and malevolent. But what we found out was he was terribly lonely. He felt out of control, so he was trying to gain control. And he was hungry. And when you're hungry, it's hard to give a spirit a Snickers. Like, isn't that the candy bar where they're like, there's that set of
Yes.
commercials where they give you a Snickers and then you're fine, right? And so, one of the things that has been happening as people contact me and say, there's something in my house, or there is something in my that seems to be following me around, is does that spirit just need a Snickers? But our first reaction is fear. How can we give them an energetic candy bar and then get them to a place where they're having a nice salad with some salmon on top? And where there's a stream of energy coming to them so that they don't try to rip off our protection jewelry and pull their energy straight out of us, right? And what we found over time is, now whenever, like, I have a class nearly every 2 weeks in that house in the wintertime. And I say to the students, full disclosure, the reason this class is being offered in the dead of winter is because I'm literally just trying to keep energy moving in this building so the spirits aren't starving by April and they start scratching and biting people again. And so every time we have a class now, we go upstairs and we get the doll that Macmillan likes, and we bring him down and we put him on the piano and we talk to him during class, and we pass the doll around the circle, and anybody who's willing will sit and embrace and hold the doll so Macmillan can feel some touch. And then at the end of the day, we put him back upstairs and he's in a great mood. He's getting attention, he's getting energy. He's not starving now. Now he's just become part of the group and he gets to see people once a week. And so Joseph is in the house and things are going fine. And then there's also times when you have to be like, I am throwing a Snickers at a vortex of chaos, and that's not going to do it. I need to back up and go, whoa, let's get some bigger energetic deities and entities than me in here. Let me call in Michael. Let me call in. And we now need to get the heavy hitters in on this game where I may need to be the first steps, but then they're going to need to see what they can do to take over. And in that case, my human body might just need to get the heck out of Dodge for a while. But the thing was, in this case, you had built trust. And so you were able to be the gate, calmed the other gates. I'm just in awe.
I am so grateful, so grateful for all those that helped me get to that point, and for Reiki and the guidance of all of that, and Archangel Michael's presence. And there were a couple things that came up for me. That one is the question that I've been meaning to ask for a longest time. And this was something that, and I've had this question since the beginning, but I felt like I had some sort of understanding. So having the ability to do these spirit releases, whether it's calling light through, Jonathan's methods, whether it's doing the holy fire healing spirit attachments thing, I feel like one of the things that I've come to realize between like your work and what I do with Reiki was that we definitely have the right to do that process for people who are asking for it, because we as a person, like, it's not a house or a piece of land that belongs to no one, essentially. It's like you may have a deed, but that doesn't mean anything. Those people had a deed 300 years ago or 1,000 years ago, and it's land. It can't belong to anybody. But, personally, this is my energy vehicle. This is my human body that I have a right to then say what stays and what goes, kind of thing. And so my understanding has been that we always have the right to do this process for ourselves, because we can say, you cannot be here anymore. This is my body, my human energy field, and so you always have the right to be able to do that process. When you started working at the Blue Ball Inn, or working with the Blue Ball Inn, the first thing I thought was, I'll just do a spirit release on it, because I've done that in other places, like places at the barn where I came upon spirits that were kind of stuck, and I did the spirit release and they happily left. And the way that I was kind of taught was that essentially anytime you come upon spirit stuck anywhere, do the spirit release and everybody's healed and everything's great. But when we came upon the Blue Ball Inn, there was also a sense of, one, I don't have a right to say, this is my space. Like, I've just bought this house. This is my space. Everybody has to leave. But at the same time, that's not necessarily what doing the spirit release is. You're not commanding people to do anything. You're calling in light,
Right.
which is then calling in, what did he say? Calling in a gate. And we have Michael, which is order and all these different things, but Michael is technically not a part of the Reiki process. He's just part of my process. But I remember it was like, no, people have tried to do, and I don't know if anybody has specifically done this process, but I know people had tried lots of different energetic processes to clear the spirits, and it was not appreciated at
It
all
was
and made them
not
very
appreciated.
angry. And I
Right.
remember Samael being like, no, like I could give Reiki to the entire house and just sort of offer it as, this is this is available energy for anyone who needs it and wants to use it, but that everybody was doing their own work and we needed to not do it.
Yes,
But
yes,
then when
yes.
I heard his description more of like what this process is and how calling light is opening a gate and we're bringing in order and balance, I was started wondering again about how then we would decide whether it's kind of ethical to be doing this process. And some of it may simply be, the way that I teach it is that, and I actually just taught it this way last week, was saying that my understanding is that we can offer this and say, I'm not trying to make anybody go anywhere. You all have the right to be doing your work here. I also have this tool, this access to this energy that could be beneficial for you. And so I'm going to just offer this, because not everybody has the ability to see and know and hear what's going on, but just offer it with the intention of anybody who would like to avail themselves of this energy and this opportunity to connect with greater light and healing. I'm just going to provide this. And if you're in line with this and this feels good to you, you're welcome to avail yourself of it. If this is not, that's totally fine. I respect your autonomy and your sovereignty and your right to decide.
Think you've hit the nail on the head, and this is an incredibly good point. Um, if we kind of go back to the story before where I said, why doesn't Macmillan just go through the gate? And Samael's like, it's not like it hasn't been offered, right? He knows that I'm here. He knows the gate is there. He can go through anytime he wants, but he doesn't want yet. He's not in a place yet where he's ready to do that. When I teach, the class is called the Spirit House at the inn. When we start the class, I say, I'm like, for example, we do a little actual workshop on driving out an unethical demonic practitioner, right? Which is meant to break up energy. And so one of the things that I do is I say to the house, like in class, I'll say, I'm about to describe this practice, and we are going to practice raising our energy and pulling shame outside of ourselves so that we're not carrying it. The following practice is not intended to dispel any particular entity in this house's energy. This is an example, right? We are raising energy and moving this power. Now, and I think the other difference there is that even though the inn is haunted, it's not in chaos, right? There are spirits doing their work. And what happened was people were coming in and they were doing like old-fashioned exorcisms on the house. Like, let's pop open a Bible and start, go back to hell, like stuff like that. The spirits in the house, and we know because we have over 200 years worth of spirits in that house. They're from all different faiths, they're from all different practices. Some of them weren't even there. And they found the fact that they were being portrayed as demons when a lot of them went to church every Sunday and were in fact Quakers or Roman Catholic or something else. They found that highly offensive. Second, they're doing their energetic work there. And from their point of view, we came traipsing in there to their house and they're expected to put up with it. So they did not like that attitude at all. And that's when people first started really getting sort of pushed back from the entities there in a big way, right? Like you wouldn't like somebody knocking on your door and walking into your living room and flinging holy water on your furniture and, screaming about go back to hell, right? You would hate that, right? And so they hate it too. What we are finding when that gate on the second floor malfunctioned and perhaps had the possibility at some point, it was letting through entities that were not energetically aligned with the house. And there was an imbalance of energy on one side of the gate versus in the house itself. The reason we first looked at that gate and went about it is because the spirits themselves asked for it. They said, there's a ton of energy in here. We cannot handle it. Some of the spirits in the house that have been brought in don't know where they are. They're hysterical. It's basically like we have screaming roommates all night long, every day. You've got to do something to help us get this under control. And I said, what can we do? And they listed things they wanted. And then I went back to the living and said, you guys, paranormal teams have to energetically cleanse their equipment before they come into this house. They are dragging things in here, unwanted guests who are hysterical and dislocated. B, you can't bring every single antique ever into the house on one weekend. And it's all the stuff nobody else wanted. There's a reason nobody wanted it. It's loaded with energy. So I started doing regular energetic cleansings of just residual energy. So the spirits didn't have to balance it, right? Third, I said, anybody who comes into this house on a paranormal investigation needs to introduce themselves. So now Robbie has the teams come in and say, hi, my name is Erin and I'm a paranormal investigator. It's nice to meet you. So that they didn't feel like strangers were coming in with all of their energy and baggage. And that started to put the house back in balance. So when you get a chaos angel, if you notice, Samuel, although they can bloom in people, it is actually a phenomenon. It is like a runaway train. If each of those entities were just peacefully doing their work separately, that would be fine and they wouldn't feel the way they do. But we are getting, because of an abnormal concentration of energy, it's essentially an energetic hurricane that nobody wants to be inside. They do not feel peaceful. They're not getting any work done. They are probably slowly starving inside it energetically. And so, in calming the chaos angel, you are not doing anything against their will. You are returning them to a place where they are balanced enough to make a decision about whether they want to stay or go. You're basically just putting the brakes on the train. You're stopping the swirling and going, hey, anybody in here who wants to get out? And as you experienced, as soon as that energy was introduced, to put the brakes on and allow a possibility for order, a heck of a lot of spirits went, I'm out.
Yeah.
I don't like this. I don't want to be here. So, what you're doing, to go back to our film analogy, is that reality is spinning and spinning and spinning and flapping and flapping and flapping. That's not how a film is supposed to run. There's no stories being told in a chaos angel. There's no forward progress. It's just a brake that is flipping around. And the entities inside it are just trying to balance their energy so they can get their bearings. So, what you're doing is coming in with that is you are not altering their spiritual path. You are pulling the plug on the electrical thing that makes the rotary stop spinning. And then they can all go, oh, that was dizzy. And then you say, guys, I have energy. Is anybody hungry? Yes. All right, guys. Now that some of you have had your Snickers, Michael's here. Anybody ready to go with Michael? Some of us got some work to do still, but now we can go on our way. And other ones will go, yeah, I'm freaking ready to go with Michael.
Yeah.
So you're kind of putting the brakes on the situation. The chaos angel is an energetic storm. It's a phenomenon. And then inside, what you're doing is allowing those entities to then choose what they want to do because they're just not holding on for dear life.
So, this is where we will leave you for this week, and then we will continue next week. But in order to leave you here in a good place, it seemed only fitting to end the podcast with the spirit release to lift and clear away all those energies that we pick up during the day. So, this is Peace and Release. And again, if you want to be able to access it, it's streaming for free on my website, omnivara.com, and have a link to the Bandcamp where you can be able to stream it or download it in a much higher quality as well. So here is Peace and Release, and I hope that your week is filled with peace. Many blessings. Until next time.